it's you again! Happy to see you back! Sleeping Beauty, tap again to play this story. Chicken Little, Rapunzel.
Once upon a time, there was a man and his wife. They had wanted a child for a long time, but had never had one. One day, a miracle happened, and the woman gave her husband the news that they had both so long wished for. They were going to have a baby. The man and his wife lived in a house with a small window in the kitchen overlooking a beautiful garden of fresh vegetables and flowers. Unfortunately, there was a high wall of barbed wire around it, and no one ever entered it because it belonged to a mighty witch, who everyone was terrified of. One day, the woman was looking out into the garden when she saw a bed filled with fresh radishes. They looked so enticing that she began to want some. This went on for days. She knew she could not get the radishes, and she got more and more feeble by the day. Her husband was worried about her and asked, "What is the matter, dear wife?" "I feel like I will die unless I can eat some of those radishes that grow in the witch's garden." The man, who loved his wife very much, thought that he would rather get caught by the witch than lose his beloved. He waited for night to fall so he could climb over the wall into the garden. Unseen by anyone, he quickly plucked a handful of radishes and took them to his wife. She made a radish salad and ate to her heart's content, but it tasted so good that the next day she longed for twice as many as she had before. The man had to climb over the wall again if he wanted his wife to feel well. So he went at twilight again. As he was climbing back, he saw the witch standing in front of him. He was terribly frightened as she cried, "How dare you climb over into my garden and steal my radishes?" "Please don't judge me too hard," he answered. "I did it for my wife. She saw your radishes out of the window and started longing for them so badly that she would have died if she could not have had some to eat." Then the witch said, "If this is the truth, you may have as many radishes as you like, on one condition. You must give me your child. I will raise it like my own." The man was so scared that he promised the witch whatever she asked for. When the time came, the child was born, and the witch appeared. She gave the child the name Rapunzel, which means radish, and she took her away as she had threatened. Rapunzel grew more and more beautiful with every passing year. On her 12th birthday, the witch locked her up in a high tower in the woods. The tower had neither stairs nor a door, but only a small window above. When the witch wished to be let in, she would cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had beautiful long hair which shone like gold and which no one had ever cut. When she heard the voice of the witch, she would loosen her plaits, let her hair down until it touched the ground so that the witch could climb up. They lived that way for years. Rapunzel's beauty was locked in the tower, away from the world outside. Then one day, a prince was riding through the woods and passed by the tower. He heard a voice singing so sweetly that he stood still and listened. It was Rapunzel, who felt lonely in the tower and would often spend her time singing. The prince wanted to meet the girl who sang so beautifully, but he couldn't find a door to enter the tower. So he went back home, but he couldn't forget the girl's voice. So the next day, the prince turned back to the tower, and as he was standing there gazing at the tower, he saw the witch come up and listened while she called out, "Oh, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." What happened after that really surprised him, but he could finally see the girl who the beautiful voice belonged to. Then he saw how Rapunzel let down her long hair and how the witch climbed up the tower. The next day at dusk, he went to the tower and cried, "Oh, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." She let down her hair, and the prince climbed up. When she saw that a man had come to her room instead of the witch, she became really scared. But the prince began speaking so kindly and told her how her singing had entered into his heart and how he could have no peace until he had seen her. Rapunzel forgot her terror, and when he asked her to be his wife, she thought to herself that he was young and handsome and that she liked him much better than she liked the witch. She put her hand into his and agreed to leave the tower with him. She said, "I would go with you, but I don't know how to get out. When you come, bring a rope each time, and I will make a ladder. When it is ready, I will climb down from the tower, and you shall take me away on your horse." They agreed that he should come to her every evening as the old woman came in the daytime. So the witch knew nothing of all this until one day Rapunzel said to her, "Mother Gothel, how is it possible that you climb up here so slowly, and the prince climbs up in a moment?"
"What is this I hear?" the witch cried. "I thought I had hidden you away from the world, and you have betrayed me."
In her anger, she cut Rapunzel's beautiful hair and took her to a desert place, where she left her to live out her days in great misery. The same evening, the prince came to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." But this time, the witch let the hair down and the prince climbed up. But instead of seeing his dearest Rapunzel, he found, to his horror, the witch looking at him with glittering eyes.
"You will never see Rapunzel again,"
she told him, and with those words she pushed the prince from the tower. He fell on thorns which blinded him. Left without his sight, the prince wandered through the woods for months, until one day he heard someone singing. He didn't know where he was, nor could he see where she was, but he was sure that this was his darling Rapunzel singing. He followed the voice to come to his beloved Rapunzel. When she saw him, Rapunzel dropped the buckets of water which she was holding, and they fell into each other's arms and cried, happy to be together after such a long time. One of Rapunzel's tears fell on his skin, and in that moment a miracle happened. The prince could see again. "What happened to your hair?" he asked, and touched her hair. But before Rapunzel could even answer him, another magic happened, and her hair grew back, long and shining as it had always been. Then the prince took her to his kingdom, where he was received with great joy, and there they lived long and happily.
Wow! I just found another treasure map. Are you ready to find another treasure? I've got a new tablet. Keep reading to find all treasures. Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Once upon a time, there lived a little girl whose name was Goldilocks. One day, she decided to go for a walk in the forest. While out walking, she lost her way and found herself at the house of the Three Bears. Inside the house, she came across a kitchen table with 3 bowls of porridge laid out. She tasted the porridge in the first bowl and found it was too hot. So she tried the porridge from the second bowl, which was too cold. Finally, she tried the third bowl and found that it was just right, so she ate it all up. When she had finished the porridge, Goldilocks felt tired and went to find somewhere to sit down. The first chair she found was too big. The second chair was still too big, but the third chair felt just right. As she sat down, the chair broke into many pieces. By now, Goldilocks was very tired, so she looked for somewhere to sleep. The first bed she found was too hard. The second was too soft, but the third bed was perfect, and she fell into a deep sleep. Just then, the bears came back to their house from walking in the forest. When they came into the kitchen, they saw that someone had been eating their porridge.
"Who's been eating my porridge?"
growled Daddy Bear. "Who's been eating my porridge?" asked Mummy Bear. Finally, Baby Bear cried,
Who's been eating my porridge and eaten it all up?
Then the three bears spotted that someone had been sitting in their chairs.
"Who's been sitting in my chair?"
howled Daddy Bear. "Who's been sitting in my chair?" wondered Mummy Bear. Baby Bear cried,
Who's been sitting in my chair and broken it up into pieces?
The three bears ran up the stairs to check their bedrooms and saw that someone had been sleeping in their beds.
"Who's been sleeping in my bed?"
roared Daddy Bear.
"And who's been sleeping in my bed?"
growled Mummy Bear. Finally, Baby Bear cried,
Someone has been sleeping in my bed and they are still in it!
Goldilocks was woken up by their shouting and was so scared she jumped out of the bed and ran out of the open window back into the forest. She ran home to her mother and vowed she would never again go for a walk in the forest alone.
Wow! I just found another treasure map. Are you ready to find another treasure?
It's a ship model I made myself.
Keep reading to find all treasures. The Three Little Pigs.
Once upon a time, there were three happy little pigs. The first little pig played the flute, the second little pig played the violin, and the third little pig played the piano. One day, their mother said,
Dearest sons, you are old enough and big enough to leave home and start your own life. Be wise and take good care of yourselves and of each other.
So the three pigs left home, and they each decided to build a house. The first little pig gathered some straw and built his house very quickly.
Now the wolf can't catch and eat me,
he said happily, and went back to playing the flute and dancing. The second little pig made his house of sticks.
Great,
he thought.
Now the wolf can't eat me either.
His house didn't take very long to build either, and he soon joined his brother playing games and making music. They were playing and singing, and all the while, the third little pig was still building his house of bricks. The other two little pigs laughed at him for working so hard, but he didn't mind. Instead, he said,
"When the big bad wolf comes, you'll see what happens."
Some time later, the pigs were working outside when all of a sudden the big bad wolf came. Each pig went into his house to hide.
Little pig, let me come in,"
said the wolf to the first pig.
Not by the hair on my chinny chin chin,
said the first little pig bravely.
Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," the wolf said. He huffed and he puffed and he blew the first little pig's house away. The pig squealed and ran to his brother's house, but the wolf huffed and puffed and blew away the stick house too. The two little pigs squealed and ran into the brick house their brother had built. The wolf huffed and he puffed and he huffed and he puffed, but even with all that huffing and puffing, he couldn't blow the brick house down. But this was a cunning wolf. He had another idea. He decided to break into the house through the chimney. But the clever little pig had already thought of that. There was a pot of boiling water simmering away on the fire. The big bad wolf fell into the hot pot, and he died. The two pigs understood their brother's lesson and decided not to be lazy any more. The very next day, they built houses of bricks. Now the first and second little pigs had all the time in the world to play the flute and the violin and to sing. The third little pig accompanied them on the piano, and the three lived happily ever after, safe and sound in their little brick houses.
Wow! I just found another treasure map. Are you ready to find another treasure? Hey, that's my pirate hat. Keep reading to find all treasures. Sleeping Beauty.
Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen. The queen had wanted a child for a very long time, but couldn't have one. One day, the miracle finally happened, and all the bells in the kingdom started ringing to announce the birth of a young princess. The king and the queen organized a huge celebration for the little girl's christening. All the 7 fairy godmothers arrived to the royal party to give the little angel their gifts. As they were special guests, the royal family had prepared a gift for each of them. Laid on the table in front of each of the godmothers was a gold case containing a knife, fork, and spoon, all made of pure gold and set with rubies and diamonds. As the guests were enjoying the celebration, the doors opened with a crash. It was an old humpbacked fairy wearing black rags. The king immediately ordered to bring her gold tableware, but he couldn't give her a gold case because he had only had 7 of them made. The old woman thought that they didn't respect her enough and hissed some curse towards the newborn. Luckily, sitting next to her was a young and very far-sighted fairy who noticed how fiercely the old woman was looking towards the baby. When the fairies left the table, she hurried to hide herself behind the curtains. Soon the fairies gathered around the baby, and one after another started giving their gifts in the form of a spell. The youngest of them wished for the princess to grow beautiful. The next one wished for the princess to have a kind and generous soul. The third wished for the princess to do everything with grace. The fourth wished for the girl to dance as light as a feather. The fifth one wished, "May she sing like a bird." And the sixth said, "May she play all musical instruments beautifully." Next, it was the old fairy's turn, and she bent over the child.
"May you have your hand pierced with a spindle and die of the wound."
When she said her terrible spell, she grinned, showing her ugly yellow teeth. At that moment, the wise fairy godmother, who had been hiding behind the curtains, came out and said, "Calm down, everyone. The princess won't die, but she will fall in a deep and long sleep, which will last for 100 years. and when that period ends, a young prince will come and wake her up." When she saw that she was tricked, the old woman ran away crying because she couldn't do any more harm. To avoid his daughter piercing her finger, the king went out and ordered that all women who owned or used a spindle be beheaded. 15 or 16 years passed and nothing happened. But one day, the young princess was wandering around the castle and noticed something very curious while climbing up the tower. In a small room, there was an old lady spinning her spindle. "What are you doing, madam?" the princess asked, and the old woman replied, "I am spinning, your highness." The princess found the activity really interesting and decided to try it. But as soon as she took the spindle, the end pierced the princess's finger and she fainted on the floor. The old lady cried out for help. In a moment, help came and they tried to revive her. Someone sprinkled her face with water, another loosened her clothes, a third massaged her arms, but despite all this, the princess lay still. The king arrived, and at the sight of his daughter, he remembered the old fairy godmother's spell. The time had come, and the king ordered the princess to be laid on a bed embroidered with gold and silver. As she slept, her beauty remained vivid, and she looked like an angel. The far-sighted fairy godmother that had saved the girl's life was told what had happened. She rushed to reach the kingdom as fast as possible because she was 12,000 miles away. When she arrived, the king helped her out of her magic coach. When the fairy godmother saw what had been done by the time she arrived, she was impressed. However, the thought of the princess waking up 100 years later, surrounded by people she didn't know, terrified the fairy. So she put everyone in the kingdom into a deep sleep. Nannies, servants, noblemen, butlers, soldiers, and even the princess's small puppy went to sleep. Then the king and queen wiped their tears away, kissed their child, and gave the orders that no one should approach the castle. In less than 15 minutes, thick and dark woods and bushes grew before the eyes of the king and the queen. No one could see the castle, and even if they saw it, no one would have the courage to enter. The years passed, and the king and queen passed away. The kingdom was still, and not a single sound could be heard from its halls and chambers. The princess was still sleeping. One day, 100 years later, a young prince was passing by the enchanted wood when he suddenly saw something he had never seen before. Through the trees, he could see towers. He asked a passer-by what they were.
"I am not sure, my lord, but I remember that my father once told me a story about the most beautiful princess in the world, who was cursed to fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. One prince has been chosen to be the only one who can wake her up." At the news, the brave prince went into the woods and fought for a long time with branches and roots. As soon as he got past one tree, the woods would close up behind him. He found this scary, but spurred himself on with the thought that he might be the chosen prince from the story. The prince finally reached the castle. He was shocked to see people sleeping everywhere. Judging by their clothes, they had been there for a century. He didn't give up and started searching the rooms one after another until he finally found her. A 15 or 16-year-old princess was lying in a bed. The prince went to the bed and kissed the princess. She opened her beautiful eyes and smiled at him. "I have been waiting for you to come," she said. "What took you so long?" Everyone else in the kingdom woke up at the same time. They all went back to work. The prince and princess organized a lavish wedding and invited the whole kingdom to it. There was food and drinks for everyone. The brave prince married the beautiful princess, and they both lived happily ever after.